Now we're going to read the second half of Buffalo Bill, so pages 24 to 40, which is the end. While the riders of the Pony Express were speeding across mountains and plains, other men were struggling to put up telegraph wires across the country. Indians burned the poles, and buffaloes rubbed their backs against them until they toppled over. But new poles came up, and when Bill and his friends had been riding for 2 years, the line was completed. Almost before a pony could be saddled, the telegraph wires had carried the news from coast to coast. The days of the Pony Express were over. This was at the time when the Civil War was raging in the United States. The people in Kansas wanted no slaves, and Bill and the other boys marched off to the east to fight. Bill was now a young man, and he was a handsome soldier. He got himself a little wife, as soldiers were apt to do, but he could not stay contented away from the wide open spaces of the West. And when the war was over, he returned to Kansas with his wife. Now he had a family to support, and for a while he drove a stagecoach. That was fun and well paid, too. He swung his whip and soared across the plains. He grew a long mustache and a short goatee and let his hair fall down over his shoulders. That was to tease the Indians, who would never get that handsome scalp, he said. As in the old days, clouds raced over the endless sky, and prairie dogs came scurrying out of their burrows to scold intruders and scramble into their holes again. But the wilderness of Bill's childhood had changed. Kansas had now become a state, and more people were moving in. Puffing little trains were eating their way through the grass, ever deeper into the plains. In front of them were buffalo herds and whooping Indians, but in their wake were farms and bustling towns. In vain, Bill tried to race the steaming engines. He laughed in glee when buffaloes blocked the tracks, for then the train had to stop, however much the engine puffed and whistled. And here's a picture of here comes the train, but the buffalo are coming in front of the train, which is making the train have to stop. And then here would be a carriage that got stuck in the train track, and so the train would have to stop. So the trains are bringing people so that Buffalo Bill doesn't have to bring the people anymore, and so it's sort of the competition. And the train is also bringing people to settle, which then means that the prairies are going away. So that is part of why Buffalo Bill might have wanted to stop them and would laugh when they had a problem. Bill saw the railroaders getting rich, selling lots for towns wherever a station was built. I'll build a town and get rich myself, he thought. So he got himself a piece of land straight out ahead of the railroad tracks. He divided the land into squares and laid out streets on the prairie grass. He called the place Rome, and he talked so boastingly about what a fine town this Rome would be that people came from far and near and started building their houses. When the tracks came, in they would pay for their lots. Bill felt like a millionaire. And the railroad tracks were built to the town, right through the town and right on beyond. The railroaders planned no station in Rome. They wanted to sell their own land. So here's a picture of the town. So a few miles away, they built a depot. "Gentlemen, this is the site of your town," they called. "Come buy our lots. We'll move you here for nothing." So every soul pulled up and moved. There stood Bill as poor as before, but the railroaders were still richer. I didn't hit gold this time, thought Bill, but I still have my horse and my gun. And the railroaders, for all their money, were hungry for meat. Juicy buffalo steaks were good, But hostile Indians watched over the buffalo herds, eager to scalp white hunters. Bill was so sure no Indian could ever catch him. His horse was so fast and so well trained, Bill only had to whisper into its ear, and it would do his bidding. He would hunt buffalo for the railroaders, and so great a hunter was he that he kept more than 1,000 men supplied with meat. The railroaders paid him handsomely and boasted there wasn't a hunter like him on the plains. They called him Buffalo Bill. That was a name to Bill's liking. But there was another Bill on the plains who also answered to the name of Buffalo Bill. Both Buffalo Bills were big hunters, and they decided to hunt together one day and see who was the best. The one who lost would be just plain Bill again. Bill Cody was so sure of himself, he rode bareback to give his rival a better chance. So bareback means he did not have a saddle on his horse, which makes it a little harder to ride. His horse knew just what to do. It ran in front of a buffalo herd and put itself in position so Bill could shoot. The horse would let him miss one shot, but if he ever missed twice, it galloped off to another buffalo. When the buffaloes were counted, Bill had shot almost half again as many as his rival. From then on, he was the one and only Buffalo Bill. So here you see the rival, and he's trying to shoot these buffalo. And here we have Buffalo Bill, our hero, and he has no saddle, and he's turned around and he's shooting at the buffalo. And it was saying that the horse could tell that if he did not hit the buffalo after 2 shots, he would move to a different place so that Buffalo Bill could try somewhere else. But with growing fury, the Indians looked at the white men who were taking their land and killing off their buffalo herds. Soon, Indian war drums sounded all over the plains. Soldiers were sent out to protect the white men and drive the Indians off their ancient hunting grounds. Buffalo Bill was sorry for the Indians, but he knew that, vast as the plains were, there wasn't room for Indians and white men both. And as he knew the plains better than most other white men, he became an army scout. The soldiers thought as much of him as the railroaders had. He was full of cheer and good stories. He was seldom tired and never afraid. When nobody else dared ride with warnings to outlying forts, he rode alone. He tied himself to his horse so he wouldn't lose his mount if it stumbled into a prairie dog hole in the dark and sent him flying. Without his horse, a man was badly off in the plains. One day, when Buffalo Bill was riding an ornery government mule, he alighted to drink from a stream and dropped the rein for a second. Right away, the mule made off. Bill tried to catch it, but in vain. When he ran, the mule ran. When he walked, the mule walked. When he walked, the mule walked too, just ahead of him. So Bill ran and he walked and he walked and he ran for 30 miles, while the mule looked back at him with a smirk. Fortunately for Buffalo Bill, he met no Indians that day. Even Buffalo Bill could lose his mount, but he never lost his way in the wilderness when he led the soldiers in pursuit of dodging Indians. His trained eyes saw each quiver of the sagebrush, each broken blade of grass. Where he led the way in his white buckskin suit, the soldiers followed. In fighting, too, he charged on ahead with arrows flying about his head. One day, an arrow went straight through his hat, but Buffalo Bill had luck on his side. The arrow only scratched his scalp. One tribe after another was rounded up and sent off to reservations. Soon the last hostile Indian was forced to move toward the setting sun. Before long, settlers were plowing their fields where buffalo once had roamed. Law and order had come to Kansas, but Buffalo Bill was bored. One day, as he dozed in the shade under a wagon, wondering what to do now, a shiny boot nudged him awake. So here's a man, and see he's nudging Buffalo Bill under the wagon. "Aha," said the fat little man to whom the boot belonged. "So you are as handsome as they say you are brave. If you'll tell me your adventures, I'll write them in books and make you famous." That suited Buffalo Bill just fine. He liked very much telling tall tales about his adventures, and the little fat man was a very fast writer. Soon, people all over the country were reading dime novels about Buffalo Bill and his amazing adventures, and wanted to see their hero in person. He went east to the big cities. He traveled north. He traveled south. He looked so brave and so handsome in his wide-brimmed hat and his snow-white buckskin suit that people came from far and near to look at him. They paid much money to see him shoot his gun and do his Wild West stunts. Buffalo Bill had hit gold. He went home and talked some of his hard-shooting, rough-riding friends from the plains into coming with him. He rounded up some Indians, too, and he started a show of his own. All over the United States, yes, even in Europe, people cheered when Buffalo Bill and his Wild West show came to town. Children and grown-ups, plain people, lords and kings thronged to watch whooping Indians race their ponies in pursuit of stagecoaches and covered wagons. Then, in a cloud of sawdust, gallant and handsome Buffalo Bill, followed by his Wild West riders, came to the rescue. They always arrived in the nick of time. There was no end to their daring. The Indians were shot to appear again as fierce as ever in the next act. For 40 years, Buffalo Bill traveled all over with his show. He, more than any other man, made the world aware of the romantic Wild West and the wonderful new lands west of the Missouri. He grew famous and rich, but still he could not stay contented for long, away from the wide open spaces of home. Home to him did not mean only the gently rolling hillocks of Kansas, where his father's humble cabin stood, but all the vast expanse of the plains and mountains where he had roamed in his youth. High up in Wyoming, he built himself a fine ranch where his wife and his children could live in comfort. And there, not far from Yellowstone Park, he helped to found the beautiful town of Cody, named in his honor. Kansas, Nebraska, Wyoming, Colorado all vied with each other in claiming him as one of their own. Buffalo Bill grew old, but as long as he lived, his gun hand was steady, and he and his horse still seemed to be one. He never grew tired of telling his tales of the days of his youth when the Wild West was wild. And when he died, old and full of years, he had chosen for himself, as his last resting place, the top of a mountain in Colorado, overlooking the plains he had loved so much.
Mom?